Uh-oh, you're all being recorded. Watch out. I am. So we're. How do I know? We have the two of us, but we don't have the. Hang on, let me try this. This might be better. There we go. All right. Terrie, how are you?
I am fine, Chris. It's good to finally meet you.
Likewise. And I'm so excited that we have you here.
Thank you.
So you know a little bit about me, but for the folks here, let me tell you, I am the travel writer for the Boston Globe, and I'm also a big Murder, She Wrote fan. And so I was one of those nerds, surprise, where every Sunday night when I was in junior high and high school, it was blocked off for Murder, She Wrote. You know, this is back in the day. We had one TV in the house. And
I remember.
People knew not to get near that TV at 8 o'clock on Sunday night. Otherwise, they were done for. Let me see if I can turn you a little bit more this way so we can get some more volume for you. So I'm going to start, obviously, like I said, I have a big connection to the show and a lot of affection for it. How about you? I mean, you're writing the books now. Were you watching as carefully as I was back in the day?
From 1984 to 1996, when it moved to Thursday nights, that was the last year. I know.
Wow.
Finally, it was so bad. I'm older than you are, and I had small children. Oh, bless you. I had small children at the time. And, you know, in the old days, you used to spend Sundays at your mother's house. And my mother lived in the Bronx, and we live in Queens. This is New York City. So by 6:30 on Sunday night, I'd be frantically packing up toys. And my husband would always be, calm down, we'll get there in time. And I go, like, no, there could be traffic on the bridge. I was like a lunatic. You didn't have DVRs, you know, you'd have to wait till the summer for the rerun. And I was quite addicted. And then the books came out while the TV show was still on. So I could read the books in between the shows. It was very exciting. So I've always been addicted.
I mean, you were even more hardcore than me, which is really saying something. You mentioned that there were books that were happening while the show was still on. And I know Donald Bain wrote a lot of those books.
Yes.
For a very long time. It was 52 of them.
He wrote 46, and he was in the middle of the 47th when he became ill. So John Land took over at 47 and then wrote through 52. And then they asked me to come on for 53.
Now, before you started, before you picked up the franchise, were you a mystery writer in your own world?
I started writing mystery short stories in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004. It took me about 5 years to get my first short story published. And then I also had written a novel, which I shopped around for years, that everyone hated and no one would buy. But I had all this faith in it. And then one day I met a wonderful woman named Kim Lionetti, who was my agent. And she said to me, this book is going nowhere. However, you can write fairly well. You should write something else. And she was the first one to, it sounds ridiculous. I'm a grown person. I needed somebody to tell me, try something else. And I wrote a beach series. Well, I wrote the first half of the first book of the beach series, and she sold it to Berkeley Prime Crime. And then while I was writing that, a woman named, I have great people in my life, Laura Childs, who had read my first book, wanted an assistant to help her write, because she writes 3 series. So I started writing with her. So I've been with Berkeley for about 10 years.
Okay, and is Berkeley the same press that publishes the Murder, She Wrote?
It's a division of Penguin Random House. And
Okay.
one of them, Penguin and Random House before they merged, one of them always had the Murder, She Wrote books. So as there were mergers and different things, it landed, I don't know how many years ago, in Berkeley. So that's where it was. I'm making the assumption because John Land, who besides writing his Caitlin series, is now also writing another series, that he didn't have time and they were looking for somebody else.
Got it. Now, this is an interesting question. I mean, for me, because as a writer, every writer has a distinct voice, I feel
Yes.
like. And obviously you would have your own voice different from John or Donald. Did you have to study the way that they were writing their books and the voice they developed? Or did you kind of say, this is my baby now, and I'm going to take control the way I want to?
This is my baby now. I was very confident in my own relationship with Jessica Fletcher and Murder, She Wrote. I should tell you as an aside, in 2009, I had thyroid cancer. And I had to be in isolation for months. Like you'd go to treatments, you'd be in isolation 2 weeks, go for treatments. I didn't have cable TV because I didn't have time for that. But I got cable while I was sick. And there was Jessica Fletcher, a friend. And by then I was writing. So not only did I love the mystery part, but when she would be like, I'm on deadline and I have to get this to my editor, I go, I know what you mean. So, buddies in a way,
right,
that I felt like I could put her in on paper and the people around her in a way that many of her fans would understand, because I am her biggest fan. And that's why Dawn did a good job, John did a good job. Now it's my turn and I want to do a great job for Jessica, who is always hanging over my shoulder. She'll yell at me.
One of the things that I was thinking about is you had two men previously writing this series, which would have I feel like a different tone to it almost, because,
Yes.
if I were writing a series and I was thinking as a woman writing this, well, as a big gay, it would be easy for me, but for other people, maybe not so much. So do you feel like you're bringing something different to it as a woman, as opposed to the men who were writing it before you?
What I do feel is there is more of a sense of girlfriends. In this particular book that we're talking about, Killing in a Koi Pond, Jessica is friends with the woman whose husband dies. And besides, and this wasn't me, this was Jessica put this in the book. All through the book, you see, not only is Jessica trying to make sure Dolores doesn't go to jail for killing her husband, but she's also helping her through the initial stages of widowhood. And that is something like, I feel very strongly how people relate to each other in a tragedy is not just about solving the crime part. There are other parts of the tragedy, but in all fairness, Jessica just ran into that book and started helping Dolores with the funeral parlor and all this stuff. I was like, a little surprised that she took that, but I think it was in the back of my head I'm not a widow, but I've been through widowhood with several of my friends. And, as we all know, it's devastating. We all know it's terrible, but it's another thing to have it in front of you. And
Exactly.
Jessica responded to it very, very quickly. I was quite proud of her.
Now, this is fascinating because I'm getting a little bit of Three Faces of Eve situation right now. You could have like a split personality when it comes to writing this, because you're talking about Jessica jumping into this as if she's not springing from your imagination in this. Did you
Oh,
feel
yeah,
like-
no. All your characters, anything I write, I've written, this is my 8th or 9th novel. I've written dozens of short stories. When you're writing that story, that person is in your head.
Mhm.
Like they're just there. And they, in the back of my mind, there are conversations going on that I know nothing about until they come to the front of my mind. And all of a sudden, I mean, that's just me. That might not be every writer. And it's not easy. I mean, you can sit at the computer thinking, oh, I had that great idea this morning. And once you sit down, it just like wasn't the greatest of ideas. I also talk to my characters, but I also talk to myself. So.
And what does your therapist say about this?
I'm saving up for one. Actually, I have 7 grandchildren, and that is way better than therapy. Way,
totally agree. They probably have to listen to everything, and they have to be polite because they're your grandchildren. So.
Yeah, sometimes. Well, 4 of them are teenagers, so
Oh yeah, so all bets are off when it comes to eating.
They think this is a wonderful career for grandma to have. It keeps her busy and out of trouble, so
I can tell you're probably a little bit of a hellraiser, so I think it's
back in the day. No more.
Now, I know why I had a connection with Jessica Fletcher and Cabot Cove and that whole world, but I'm curious to hear, as a New Yorker who was rushing home to see Murder, She Wrote, what was the appeal for you, both for the character and also for the world that she inhabited?
The character, my appeal to for the character was, she was a woman of a certain age, older than me, when everybody else, I was hitting the age where everybody else on television was younger than me.
Yep.
Then her personality was so forthright, and she believed in truth above all. Truth is very, very important. Truth is very important to me. She believed in truth above all. She was iron-willed in a way, but she never put herself in direct danger. Like on the TV show, she'll confront the murderer, but the cops are in the other room just waiting for the confession. She does. And I don't like, that's why I read cozies, that's why I write cozies. I don't like gratuitous violence in my reading. I don't like bad language in my reading. I don't like overt sex in my reading. I don't, certainly in those days you couldn't get it on television, now you can. But those things, that's what appealed to me. Those kinds of books, those kinds of shows appeal to me. So, when I started writing it, my daughter always makes fun of me because I do have one short story where I set a car on fire with a woman in it. So when I talk about all the gentle stuff that I like, she always brings up that woman. I always say to her, but she deserved it. And she's like, Mom, no one deserves that, But generally speaking, I like things to be very calm, very modern. That's what I like. And Jessica is it. I mean, she just is all of that. There's no, we never all of a sudden find 3 bloody dead bodies in 15 minutes, like on some shows. And the other thing I love is no car chases. That was during the era of car chases. Every show you put on, there had to be a 5-minute car chase. Movies, 10-minute car chase. And there she was going, nah, I don't drive.
Right.
It also gave her the opportunity to speak to her driver if a sheriff was driving her, or a friend, or a suspect. So it was 2-way street.
Right. obviously one of the things that was an appeal of the show was trying to figure out who did it. You know, we would all sit and our brains would churn, which is one of the things that I liked about it, is that it made me think. It made me stop thinking about Casey Kasem's top 10 for that particular week and focus on, you know, who did this murder. Did you consistently figure out who did it every week?
No.
Wow.
And the reason I didn't was because if I thought I was getting close, I would turn it off. Not the show, my mind.
Okay.
Turn off my mind because I want to be entertained. I didn't want to be like, you know, sometimes I could say, oh, and that's the other thing with the shows. You see things that Jessica doesn't see. Like there'll be, you know, in an episode, there'll be half dozen scenes that she's not in. And that's not true in the books because the books are written in first person. So if she doesn't see it, someone has to tell her about it, or she has to find out about it in some way. So that is a big difference for me when the books first came out. You know, when I started reading Dawn's books in first person, it was almost easier for me not to hunt for a killer because I didn't have to worry about anything Jessica didn't see.
That's actually a really good point, because there would be sort of like the fights between the daughter and the father about the inheritance. And it was always, you know, she didn't see that. It was,
and they might be a red herring. That might have nothing to do at the end when you find out the murder was the grandmother's cousin or something.
Right.
Totally different. So, but they have more opportunity in television to throw the scenes at you. In a book, we could do it, but then it can't be in first person. And since the books are in first person, I continued in first person, which is my preferred place anyway.
Yeah, I totally get that, especially with a character as strong as Jessica Fletcher. You would definitely want that. Now, here's some total nerddom questions for you. Did you have a favorite guest star on the show? Is there an episode you remember that had a great guest star?
My favorite guest star is Jerry Orbach, Harry McGraw. Now, I got to tell you, Len Cariou, Michael Haggerty is a second. But Harry McGraw was only in about 5 or 6 episodes. My favorite happened to be the last one he was in, The Skinny with Nick Culhane. And I liked it because Harry McGraw wound up in Cabot Cove, which, you know, with the assorted wackos that came with him, you know, but that's one of my favorite episodes.
And did you ever feel like with Jessica, sometimes she should maybe have disowned her family, like her nephew who seemed to be getting in trouble, and, you know, just kind of like, what are these people thinking?
She has the largest family of people who can walk 10 feet without getting into trouble. Somebody put up on the internet one time years ago a picture of Jessica with a picture of every one of her nieces and nephews that had gotten into some sort of trouble. And it was like this big, huge thing. I couldn't, you know, you forget how many of them there are, because the one we know and the one that'll in fact be in my third book is Grady, who's married to Donna and now has a little boy named Frank. But Grady was the one we saw the most of. But there was so many of them.
Yeah, there was always a niece or nephew.
Yes. And some of them were Frank's and some of them were hers. And, you know, her brother, her brother, whose name I forget, she went on a cruise with his daughter, her niece. And of course, then there was a problem on the cruise and there was a dead body and Jessica had to fix it all. But the only time I ever saw the brother, he's posing with his daughter and Jessica in front of the boat, and somebody takes their picture, some woman. And then I didn't know she ever had a brother again, you know, but the niece kept coming.
That's great. Let's talk about the book, the new book, and I'm curious to know why you set it in the South and why not here. You know, we're all right here in lovely Cabot Cove, Kennebunkport, and maybe we're a little, you know, questioning why it's not taking place here.
Absolutely. From book 47 to book 52, they were all set in Cabot Cove. So that was number one. You froze on me. Can you hear me? Okay. They were all set.
Yes.
Okay. They were all set in Cabot Cove. Now, generally speaking, if you look at the 50 some odd books, there was only about 16 or 17 of them in Cabot Cove. If you look at the TV shows, there's only 5 or 6 Cabot Cove episodes a season. Jessica travels a lot. Otherwise, there'd be no one left in Cabot Cove. I decided that first thing I decided was that wherever she was going in my first book, my contract is for 4 books. So I had a plan for 3. The 4th one, I have a plan, but I'm holding on until I actually start writing it, because if my contract is renewed, it's the last book I'm going to write. So I kind of cancel that book and write another one. But if the contract's not renewed, then that'll be my last book. It's not even the whole book. I have the last scene that I want to write. So
wow.
That came to me in the last scene. But anyway, so my decision was, as much as I wanted to get to Cabot Cove and get into Loretta's beauty parlor, which is where I really wanted to be, I decided that the best thing I could do was go someplace else, give the readers a break from Cabot Cove. And it happened that I had gone to a conference, a really wonderful conference in Columbia, South Carolina. And my best friend lives in a small town outside Columbia now. She used to live by me here in New York, but she retired down there. And I called her up and I said, "You doing anything, whatever these dates are?" And she said, "No." I said, "Let's go to Columbia. I got a conference." Well, we went to Columbia, South Carolina, and it was like the greatest little town in the world. I really enjoyed it. You know, and of course I got more out of it because I wasn't just at the conference. I had a buddy to travel around with and catch up with. So when I was thinking, where should I put this book, Columbia came to mind because I had only been there a few months before. The other issue with these books are, I have to write a book every 6 months. You have to hand it in every 6 months. They're 2 a year. So you don't have a lot of time to decide things. So my decision was, she goes to Columbia first. She goes back to Cabot Cove next. That's Debonair and Death. She's going to be back in Cabot Cove. Then the one I'm writing now, Killer in the Court, she's going back to New York, but not to Manhattan. She's going to a beach community in Queens, where I live.
Okay, so that one you definitely
nobody even knew we had beach communities, but we do. And she's going.
No idea.
No, I know. But that's well, New York is all islands and peninsulas, so we're gonna have some beach someplace. So that's kind of how I decided to do it. And then depending on the contract, we'll see where she goes in the 4th book. But this is all very boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, I can't imagine keeping up with that pace. I was actually going to ask you because I know Donald was writing 2 a year.
Yes.
For me, it was just like, you know, people ask me if I'm ever going to write a book, and I said, absolutely, when I'm not working anymore, because I can't imagine like that pace, but you're living that pace.
Exactly. Well, I was fortunate. When I was writing my books and Laura Child asked me to write with her, I was doubling up for a couple of years anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I was used to the pace. Not that I love it. It's, you know, the couple of years that I only wrote 1 book a year, now I look back and think, oh, that was so relaxing. And I used to think I was under pressure. So that's one issue. The other thing is that with these books, and these are really interesting books, but you know, you asked about going to Cabot Cove. I would like to go to Cabot Cove like every other or 3rd book.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing with Cabot Cove is it is the one place where you see the changes. I put Jessica in South Carolina. She talks to Harry McGraw and Seth on the phone, and that's it. The rest of the people I get to make up. When she's in Cabot Cove, I have to see, the guy who used to be mayor, what was his name, Bloom, on the television. He hasn't been the mayor for years in the books. There's a different mayor. So there's a lot of changes in Cabot Cove. You have to be careful. In Loretta's beauty shop, the lady who, Phyllis Grant, she was the tourist. She does travel agency. And she's not there anymore. The travel agent lady in Cabot Cove is now the wife of the mayor. So you can't, in one of the books before me, there was an issue because Sheriff Metzger, who's still there, was married to Adele all during the TV shows and got divorced from Adele somewhere along the line in the books and now is married to Moran. And somehow in a book, Adele came back, but Adele came back as Mort's wife, which she isn't. And that caused a lot. So the research for Cabot Cove is more intense and people kind of like her to travel.
Yep.
That's why I'm here and not there kind of thing.
Exactly. That totally makes sense. For you as a fan, want to make sure there's continuity.
Yes.
In these, and you don't want Pam waking up one morning and finding Bobby Ewan in the shower because they had to make up why this happened.
It was all a dream.
It was all a dream. It was all a dream. Sue Ellen wasn't a drunk. She was dreaming. Maybe it was a Sue Ellen blackout that caused all of that to happen. When you were in South Carolina for your conference, was there a murder that caused?
No, there was not. There was not. We laugh about that and we shouldn't. We go places and first of all, we're writers. So we very rarely leave our houses. We're always working. So now you get us together, we're socially inept. And we talk about things that no one wants to sit at the table next to us in the dining room because somebody is talking about, I tried killing him with a bludgeon, but it didn't work. And what do you think about, has anybody used a hatchet lately? And no one wants to be with you. So we don't actually have murders, but I'm sure there are people that go home from the hotels we stay in and say, there was this weird bunch of old ladies I was sitting with. I don't know what they were doing.
Planning their next killing. I could just tell by looking at you. Again, Hellraiser, shady character, especially
Bronx all the way.
I think it's because of the teddy bear behind your shoulder that's giving it away.
That's the grandchildren. There's a whole row of animals here. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to turn it over to some of the folks here who are also rabid fans because I want them to be able to ask you some questions as well. So I'm going to turn the computer toward them so you can see them. Yeah, that works out, except when I'm standing in the frame. Does anyone have a question for Terrie? Don't be shy, killers. Let's hear it. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Is it continuity that this book is set in modern times versus because there's the first 5 pages, there's a cell phone.
Oh.
I'm just curious if that's a continuity thing or a conscious decision, I guess.
Do you hear that, Terrie?
No, I didn't. Could you repeat it?
Yeah, so she wants to know, she said there's a cell phone in the first few pages of this book. And are the books set in modern times? How does that work in terms of continuity?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You'll also find sooner or later she's going to take an Uber or a Lyft or something. Here's the thing with Jessica Fletcher, and this is the only thing I don't like about her. She never ages. Time modernizes around her. I wish I looked as good as she still looks in that show from 40 years ago. The world around her modernizes. For example, if you came to pick her up in a car, you would not be picking her up in a 1989 Ford. You'd be picking her up in a 2000, what do they drive now? Toyotas or something. The world around her has to modernize. We saw it in the TV show. In the beginning of the show, she used to type on a typewriter. Now she types on a computer. And yet she, during the entire 12 years of the show, she basically did not change. She really didn't even age. I don't know how she did that, but she doesn't change. So yeah, she's on a cell phone. She texts. She's got the Uber Lyft. I do not have an Uber Lyft or a Lyft app on my phone, but she does. So anything that happens that's modern, she will do, but she's timeless. So I didn't move her into the world as much as the world moved around her.
I'm going to throw in a question, which is, I think she remains timeless because I don't know, have you watched her exercise video?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Now, did you get the same tingling feeling that I got when you watched that video?
Well, when you look at her, she has the exact same body that she had in, what was that movie when she was 18 years old? I forget the name, but she's 95 years old and she looks exactly the same. I mean, she doesn't change. She's physically extremely fit. In fact, I got a note from a reader who was annoyed with me because I had Jessica jogging in this book. And she didn't think she should be jogging, but she always jogs. She rides her bicycle. You know, I mean, that's what she does. I wish I ran around, and I do ride my bike sometimes, but you know.
But do you put a towel around your neck and then a sweatshirt over it?
No, because I'm never going to get that. I'm never going to get that sweaty. That's not going to.
Well, let me correct you there. She glistens. She's not sweaty.
Glistens. You're right. I'm sorry.
All right. Let me turn it over for real questions now. Any other questions? Yes.
I have a question. So after Frank died, she famously never rekindled, he knows it was that way here and there. But do you ever envision her in the books having a romantic interest?
Did you hear that, Terry?
No.
All right, so the woman wearing the Murder, She Wrote t-shirt wants to know, you know, on the show, she's had offers, she gets proposals, but she never accepts any of them. In the books, do you ever see her either, you know, maybe she's a date app, or, you know, she has an actual romantic connection with them. She winds up in the bathroom, her exercise.
Okay, there is a man.
Sorry.
There is a man in some of the books named George Sutherland. She met him in Dawn's first book. And coincidentally, not at all coincidentally, Dawn named him after Dawn's grandfather.
Nice.
So the guy is a chief inspector or something in Scotland Yard. And because the first book that Dawn wrote is set in England. And they are kind of attracted to each other, but they live in different places. They both have very settled lives. My instinct is he would like it to be more. She's a little more hesitant. I am a single woman of a certain age. I understand her feelings completely. You know, you have your life. You don't want to get yourself well. Now, I don't have him in the first book at all. He is in the second book a little bit, just in a phone conversation. My understanding is, and there's nobody around anymore who even knows, was that Dawn wanted to make this more of a romance, but the powers that be did not think it's a good idea because the original Jessica Fletcher that we know, one of the things people loved about her was her independence. I do not foresee at this point that there will be any permanent relationship, although we know a lot of men like her. Which is,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you see an independent, vibrant woman, and obviously someone's going to be attracted, also very smart. So, however, I think maybe, they're a little hesitant because everywhere she goes, someone gets murdered and they don't want to be a victim. So, let me turn it over again. Any other questions for Terry?
I have a question.
Okay.
Do you think that there was a change in her personality when she, I think it was around season, was it 8 maybe, that she moved to New York City part-time? How do you feel about the New York-based episodes versus the Cabot Cove ones? I feel like there's kind of a change, not in the quality of the episodes, but like in the tone a little bit of the episodes once she started teaching in New York City. What are your opinions on those episodes?
was that question, what is the difference between when she had her apartment in New York and was teaching?
Yeah, how did you feel about them? Did you like them? Or the older?
I'm a New Yorker.
Yeah.
I'm a happy girl. However, that change took place and rattled a lot of us who were regular watchers because we were used to her visiting people all over or being in Cabot Cove and not having another home. I mean, the episode that when she leaves and goes to New York, they have a little party for her in her house with a little cake to start the episode off, and then off she goes and finds a dead body. But I liked that she was in New York, but I was not comfortable with it. I can't say I didn't like it because there's nothing she can do I don't like. But I wasn't comfortable with the change. The impression I got was they were trying to make her more citified and less who she was. And I didn't think it was necessary. But I also understand that from a producer's viewpoint, from an actress's viewpoint, you do something 5 or 6 years, it can get kind of boring and you want to change for everybody's sake. And rather than quit the show, which almost happened several times in the 12 years, she wasn't sure she wanted to go on. You know, the shows where you have a whole bunch in like episodes, I'm going to make this up, but I think it's season 6 and 7, where you have, she tells you the bookends. She tells you the beginning, then somebody else acts out the whole thing and she tells you the end. That was to give her a rest because she was getting tired. And in lieu of canceling the show, they gave her breaks because they worked 8 hours a day, 8 days a week on every show. And after a while, you're like, why am I doing this? So there were a lot of changes, but as I say, with the New York ones, I liked that it was in New York, but it was an abrupt departure from what we were used to, as was the bookend shows.
I'm going to throw in a question, which is, there were rumors a few years ago that there was going to be a reboot. And I think it was Olivia Spencer, who was
Terrie.
thank you. who was going to be, the new Jessica Fletcher. How did you feel? It obviously never happened because I think crazy people like this were probably threatening.
We would have revolted. We would have been, we would have been crazy. No, I wasn't happy with it. Octavia actually was the one who said it wasn't a good idea. And I think she said it because she saw the feedback from people like us who were just like, what, are you kidding? There's no other Jessica Fletcher. I will say that John Land, who wrote the books before I did, wrote a book, I forget the name, but it was like 3 books ago, where Jessica is a young woman teacher. Yes, and finds her first murder. And he goes back and forth between the two.
Okay.
When he does that, we have, he suggested the possibility of a young Jessica Fletcher.
I see. So it's like a Jessica backstory situation.
Yeah, but it didn't fly either, apparently. I mean, I don't know anything about it, but I don't think it did.
Which makes sense because nobody wants a young Jessica Fletcher because she'd be married and all of that stuff and
Yeah.
I mean, boring. Not that I don't love being married, but now that I'm here with my friends, I can fess this up. But any other questions for Terry? Yes.
So has she ever actually, and I apologize if I missed, did you actually ever meet Angela Lansbury and spend time with her and get to discuss, talk about Jessica Fletcher or anything?
Terry, did you hear that one?
No, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So the question is, have you ever met Angela Lansbury and
Oh,
discussed any of this?
no. That would be like my dream come true. I would, guys, if I ever get to go, I'll call Chris, he'll call you, you meet me, we all go together. I would love.
Yeah, I think we'd all be worshiping at that show. That's for sure. I'll just brag a minute. I saw her on Broadway. It wasn't that long ago. Well, it was, I guess now, but she was in a play where she's watching a tennis match. It was like a 2-person show. And so she's seated the whole time, which makes sense. But still, she's doing a great job. I mean, to remember all those lines at her age, I can't even remember my name, especially after this Storm and Diet Coke. So it makes sense. What about, we talked about what would have been the modern reboot. At this point, do you think that we could maybe talk Angela Lansbury into one more Murder, She Wrote movie or like a TV movie, something that would kind of fully give closure to the whole Murder, She Wrote world?
I don't think there'll ever be closure. I think people just will go on with this, I'm of the age, as I say, I was an adult when the first show came on. People way younger than me watch the show all the time. She just has that appeal. Now, somewhere here it is. There is a 4-movie collection of 4 movies that were made in, now she's the only one in it that, like Seth and everybody else we love isn't in it. But there were 4, I just got this. I haven't even seen them. I couldn't find it for a long time and then I found it. So those were made after, like in from between 97 and 2003.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's as late as we're going to get. Would I love for her to come back and do one? If she did it, like you say, sitting in a chair, and I had to kneel behind her in the chair and feed her lines, I would used to have this done, but I don't know. I have no relationship with the production company other than Berkeley has an agreement, a license agreement with Universal Studios that allows us to write these books. But nobody ever asks me anything. They're just like, write the books, hand them in every 6 months, and that's what I do. So
is it from Universal? Do they have like a standards and practices that looks over to make sure that the book series is being respectful to the TV series?
I'm going to say this to you in all candor. I am sure that at one point in time they did. I would be shocked, since these books have been around for so long, if there's anybody around. I mean, somebody redoes the license. I do know that Dawn was told he could not have a romantic relationship between Jessica and George. He could not move that forward. I guess somebody does that, but I'm not here long enough to have gotten in trouble yet. I won't know until they say, no, she can't do that. As far as I know, the way I write these books, they go through the standard process of I hand it into the story editor approves it, it goes to the copy editor tells me I use way too many commas and not enough contractions. We fixed all of that. I wrote business letters for years, and you don't use contractions in them in the old days, so I'm hopeless. You know, and it goes through, there's 2 or 3 other people that see it and it goes out. Now, if someplace along that line, somebody from Universal asks to see it, I don't know what happens. I mean, they don't ask me. You know, that's between them and Berkeley. I sign nothing with Universal, but my contract acknowledges that they have, you know, they're in charge of it. They own it. They own the copyright to all her material.
Got it. That totally makes sense.
Yes.
Totally makes sense. Were there any other questions for Terry while we have her here?
Just one quick question, something you said, in the books, especially the first couple, Mort was married to Maureen, whereas in the television programs, he was married to Adele. And you said at some point he divorced Adele. Did I miss that? Was that in the book?
It was a book.
That's, I don't know.
Yes, I can tell you. All right. I can tell you definitely in Hook, Line, and Sinker, there is a line that Jessica says about when Maureen comes into Mara's luncheonette. Jessica says something about Maureen being Mort's wife because Adele didn't like Cabot Cove anymore and went back to New York. I believe it's also mentioned before that, but I don't think in any of the books, at least I don't recall, I don't think there was ever an actual, 5 chapters worth of a divorce. I think it's just for whatever reason at the time, and I believe it was when Dawn was writing, he wanted a different character for Mort's wife. But I know it was pre-Hook, Line, and Sinker because Maureen's a major character in Hook, Line, and Sinker, and that's one of my favorites. So I remember that.
I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute, Terry. And if this isn't like good for you, then just hang up on the call.
I don't know how to do that. I always until they tell me, that the meeting is now over and it goes 5, 4, 3, 2. I'm free.
We're, after we sort of settle a bit, we're going to have a trivia situation here. And I'm wondering if there are any trivia questions that you have that you think you could stump these super fans with, just off the top of your head. Is there anything that you feel like, maybe
Yeah, what was Jessica's apartment number in New York?
we
No, I don't know the number. I'm sorry, I wasn't closer.
what was the street that you
I
said?
don't remember if it was 84 like West 32nd or something.
84 West 32nd for the street that she was on?
Well, that might, no, she wasn't on 32nd. Wasn't she in the 6th? Yeah, I have a notebook where I write all this stuff down, but the notebook's in the other room, so I'm stuck here.
No, that's okay. I, wanted to see how much I could stump before we sort of, because we'll get into easier trivia and they're going to know it all. So, so if there are any off the top of your head, if not, then, don't worry about it at all.
No, the top of my head doesn't work that way.
You and me both, sister, trust me. In that case, I will turn it toward me so I can say a proper goodbye and thank you. This has been a pleasure and an honor to be able to spend time with you this afternoon.
You were absolutely great, as was the Jessica Fletcher people surrounding you.
Yeah, they're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. So everyone has a round of applause for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate, I like knowing that there's people like me out there, because again, I spend most of my life at this computer. So it's always good to know that there are other people. And thank you. You were great, Chris. I appreciate it. I was very comfortable.
Oh, go on. My thing is to make people uncomfortable. So it's good to like have a little.
Don't let on the other travel people, but not on me. You took pity on me because it's only my second Zoom ever.
Wow, well, you did amazing for your second Zoom ever.
Because I have a third one I got to do in the library. I tried to avoid these as long as I could, but you just can't avoid them, you know.
It's true. I wish we had you here in person, but this is, you know, it's great. This is like the best alternative I can
Oh,
think of.
this was really terrific, and I am a lot more comfortable doing the Zoom thing now that I survived it, and cameras moved back and forth, and everything was really good. That was great. So thank you very much.
It was our pleasure. Thank you. Yeah, it was a pleasure, and good luck with the series. I'm going to write to your publisher and say that you should your contract should be renewed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Take
Thanks.
care.
You can turn me